Okay, so the last two parts regarding a practical building of a mikveh is one that I mentioned a few times. I didn't get into it, which is the whole concept of plastic and rubber. And the second thing is regarding the oitzer, which is the reservoir of water, which brings the water to the mikveh. Now, there is in the list of what Rabbi Landau wrote of the Hoirois that the Rebbe Rashab told him regarding building a mikveh in Rostov. One of the things that's written over there in Ois Tes, which is on page Kuf Zayin in Bet 11's book, is actually not Ois Tes, Ois Aleph. He says, "Lo lishtamish b'pkoke gumi." Do not use rubber plugs. L'fidas Rabbeinu navgam hu dover mekabel tumah. Because according to Rebbe Rashab, it's dover mekabel tumah. It's a very interesting statement. What tumah is there in rubber? Because the Rebbe Rashab, then it says they used wooden plugs, and I'm going to explain soon what the plugs were used for. But it doesn't. What it says over there, it doesn't really make too much sense. There is a letter from the Rebbe Rashab to Rebbe Nosson Nata Lerner. He was one of the ones involved in building the mikveh in Rostov. This letter was printed in the Geskedish of the Rebbe Rashab. It was found later. It was also printed in Teiras Sholom, in the Shas Chuvas Teiras Sholom that they printed of the Rebbe Rashab. It's in Siman Samach Hey. Now, over there, the Rebbe Rashab starts by saying that there are, well, we all know, there's two kinds of rubber. You have natural rubber, you have synthetic rubber, fake rubber, we'll call it. Natural rubber is made from sap that comes out from a tree. You drill a hole into a tree, and what drips down from it, and afterwards it gets processed. You put buckets. It's similar to how they get maple syrup if anybody was traveled to that region of the world. Not so far from here, it's a few hours north. And you see they drill holes and they put a bucket. So the same idea is for rubber. It's a certain sap that comes from a tree. It hardens, they process it, and then rubber comes out of it. That's natural rubber. Synthetic rubber is made from petroleum, from what gas is made from. Gas that you use for your car, gasoline, plastic, Vaseline, everything, almost everything today, including and up to artificial food colorings, is also made from petroleum. So it's all made from the same. It's one of the most used products of this world from when it was discovered. It could be used in many various applications. One of the things you can make from it is rubber. So he asks, so the Rebbe Rashab over there explains why there's no Kabbalas Tumah in this rubber. He says, if you're going to take the natural one, it's not, can't compare it to something which grows, to trees or whatever it is.
The rubber is being used for what?
We'll get to it soon. We'll discuss the rubber, then I'm going to get to soon what it was used for. The rubber, it's the same thing. It comes from a tree, but it's not made like clothing that you sew. The way that a piece of clothing becomes tameh is it has strings going one way and strings going the other way, and then it becomes tameh. And then gimel, it's a smaller size and it becomes tameh. But with rubber, you don't have that problem. And even though they use sometimes earth, they mix into the production of rubber. At least then they used. Today it's less. The Rebbe Rashab says it's not a problem because, first of all, it completely burns and changes its status when it is made. And the interesting that it's not connected to Hilchos Mikvahs, but in Hilchos Pesach, there is about mashke that was left over Pesach, that there is a svara that mashke maybe it's not the same gather as chum. It's not for drinking it, but maybe for aser ba'ana, because once the mashke is made by the alcohol evaporating, and then the distillation process. The alcohol evaporates, then it goes through a tube, it gets cold, and it becomes alcohol, liquid again. So it's a new category. So over there, the Alter Rebbe's brother, the Maril, adds over there on the side, the Alter Rebbe, that b'diavad, if somebody forgot to sell mashke, you can't drink it, but selling it for hana is not a problem. So there is a certain change that happens when you have a complete chemical conversion of a product from its natural form to a completely new form. It's no longer in its original form. So even if it will be earth, you would say earth could be compared to kli cheres, it's not really a problem. But over here he says, even if you want to compare it to kli cheres, says to glass, for example, it says glass is mostly made from earth. So it's earth from the beginning. And it goes through a process, and it doesn't get burnt after the glass is made. So it can be compared to glass. Here it's mostly not earth. And it can't be, so you can't compare it to earth. You can't compare it to glass. And even kli cheres, you can say it's a pshuti kli cheres, it's not mekabel tuma. Elamai, he says, obviously, if this plug has a clay kibble, a place where you could receive water, means it's hollow on one side, then it's a keli, regardless of what it's made from, for a different reason. But when it's completely closed, it's one piece of rubber, it's completely closed, there's no problem with it. Then he goes into discussion about wood, because ultimately the Rebbe Rashab did use wood. And he says, Pshute Kli Eitz is not Mekabel Tuma. I mean, Pshute Kli Eitz could be Mekabel Tuma if it's the right size. The Rambam is Machmir, even if it's smaller than white pieces of wood, if it was made, if it has a certain purpose for it, specific purpose is still Mekabel Tuma. But he says basically, you have a specific plugs. Then the Rebbe Rashab concludes. He says, even though according to the Rambam, plugs which are small, not plugs, I mean kli eitz, smaller than it's not, because we discussed, if you have white pieces of kli eitz, it's roi lemidros, you could step on it, so it becomes, it has a tumah. But if it's not so big, maybe it's not tumah. The Rambam holds that even smaller than that, even if it's not smoothed out, it's still mekabel tumah if it has a specific purpose. He says you don't have to worry about it over here, because even according to the Rambam himself holds that you don't need to have a yossi al de tahara. So therefore, even if it's mekabel tumah, it's not a problem. But ultimately, the Rebbe Rashab concludes, l'chayra, in using a plug made from rubber, there's absolutely no chashash. None of the chashash is above of tumah. But he says practically, it's a new thing. We don't know exactly what it's made from, what is mitzias, and you can't. It's going to be impossible to get the right size that we need. At that point, it was impossible to get. Therefore, follow what the rest of the Yidden do, and that was to use from wood. And that was what they used from wood. So in essence, we see from the Rebbe Rashab's letter the exact opposite of what Rabbi Lando wrote. So that means, could be Rabbi Lando was told that they're using wood and not rubber, and he wrote his own reason why it is, he thought it was Mekabel Tumah. We don't really have an explanation why it is Mekabel Tumah, not from Rabbi Lando. From the Rebbe Rashab we have Punkt Verkehrt. The Taras Mayim that you all have in Siman Nun Aleph has a whole section about rubber. And over there he says maybe the issue is because a piece of rubber is Tumas Midras. You step on it, it's a problem of Tumas Midras. And he says he mentions that he asked the Rebbe about it. There's a letter from the Rebbe in Igris Kedesh Chelik Zayin. The quote from that paragraph of the Rebbe's letter is back in Rabbi Levin's book on page Kuf Tes. And over there he explains, he says over there, because the Taras Mayim says there's no problem with rubber because it was not meyuchad, it was not set aside for midras, for stepping on it. So therefore it's not a problem. So the Rebbe says it's not like that, because sometimes if you have a plug on the floor of the mikveh, you have an issue that Sometimes people are going to step on it. It's made to be stepped on. Sometimes people are going to step on it to stand a little bit taller to get something. Even if it's not standard made for standing on it, it's still a problem. Now, we all know there is no plugs, there's no holes in the floor of the mikveh. The Rebbe Rashab said not to make any holes in the floor of the mikveh. So you don't really have a plug on the floor of the mikveh. So the way I understand it is what the Rebbe is referring to is, at least if anybody ever saw an old bathtub before they, from 60 years ago, in some houses in Crown Heights you can still see it. There is a rubber plug with a little chain. And that plug you put into the hole in the bathtub, and that plugs the water from going out. Then when you want to empty out the bathtub, you pull the plug out and you empty out the bathtub. So these plugs, which are commonly available, at least at the time when the Rebbe's letter was written, they had a very specific purpose. Those plugs, and it's that size that you need, were made for the purpose of plugging a hole. People would stand on it because it's on the floor. So those plugs, you're going to buy that plug. It was already miyuchad l'midrus. Even though it's the Rebbe says even ba'akroi, even if it's only once in a while that someone steps in it, it already has a problem. So those plugs have a problem of kabbalas tumah. So in essence, the problem of rubber is not an inherent problem in the rubber that it's kabbalas tumah. It's the application of this plug could be a problem. So
why are you not supposed to have drainage in a mikveh?
You're not supposed to have a hole in the bottom of the mikveh.
So
How are you going to close it? Do you drain it? How do you drain the mikveh? With a pump.
What do you mean?
What do you plug for?
Yeah.
So I'll explain right now. So what was this plug used for? Before we continue, what was this plug used for? And why is it so important to understand the concept of a plug? The Rebbe Rashab had an oitzer. Oitzer makes Sholom, a reservoir of water.
Side point, but the problem,
Huh?
that the hole is made especially for the water to drain. Is it considered a good hole?
For what? A hole for what?
Let's say if you want to make a makeup from the bathtub.
We'll discuss it at a different time. There is we'll get to a different time. Right now, we'll focus on what we're doing now. When there is you have an oitzer. The Rebbe Rashab had an oitzer, had a reservoir of water which had enough water to fill up the mikveh. It wasn't such a big oitzer, it was a small oitzer, had enough water to fill up the mikveh. Out of that oitzer, there was a hole, because he had to fill up the mikveh. It would fill up with water. That hole needed to have a plug, because otherwise all the rainwater that would come in would just slide right into the mikveh. So they had to have a plug. And so the discussion was about this plug. This plug served one purpose. The purpose of this plug was it would fill up, the oitzer would fill up to the top with rainwater. It would be time to change the water. You pulled out the plug, all the water from the oitzer came out, and then you filled up the mikveh. I'm going to get to soon about the hamshachas, how to get rid of that, of the koyach adam. And then you put the plug back in, and then you would let it fill up again with rainwater. So that's what they needed the plug for. So the plug, if it's something which is mekabel tumah, it's holding up the water, it's ma'akev the water, something which is mekabel tumah. All the water is touched or something like that. It directs the water. Yeah, but even then, it wasn't such an issue because it was only there for one-time use. All the water drained out, and when you put the plug back in, there was no water there. So when you put the plug in, it didn't hold any water. You pulled it out, the plug didn't serve any purpose once you pulled out the plug. When you put it back in, it again didn't serve any purpose. It's empty. The oitzer is empty. So you didn't really have much of a problem still. Yeah. When you have an oitzer, the oitzer is exactly the amount of water that you need. So you pull out the plug. When it's empty now. You put the plug there. It doesn't achieve anything now.
Why?
It's not directing the water.
Inside.
It's holding the water inside, but it's not. You're not toveling in the mikveh. You don't have a problem of schila. So what do you care how it's being held?
What do you mean? The fact that it's holding water.
It's holding a little bit of the water. A little bit of the water is touching a davar mekabel tumah. That's being cleared by the hamshacha right away. The rest of the water is not. It's not a keli. The whole thing is not a keli. Kabel tumah is not always the same category as a keli. if you have that, and then you drained out the mikveh, you drained out the oitzer, you put the plug back in the oitzer. Now the oitzer is empty. You filled it up again. It's also, when you put the plug back in, you didn't do anything. You didn't hold any water with it. Oitzer is empty. So you didn't have such a big problem. Even then, the Rebbe Rashab wanted to make sure it's not something which is mekabel tumah, and he used a piece of wood. Today, we have a much bigger problem, because today we make oitzers much bigger. Could hold 4, 5, 6 times the amount of water that you need. You're feeding 3 or 4 mikvahs with the same oitzer. So now you have, out of the oitzer, you have a canal, a hamshacha, which splits into 3 or 4 hamshachas. Now, to be able to direct the water, you have to have plugs on the side, because you don't want the water, once you fill up, you want to fill up first the mikveh nash. So you have plugs on the hamshacha to the mikveh nashim, and a plug on the hamshacha to the mikveh kelim. And then the water runs based on those 2 plugs and goes to the mikveh. If that plug is a chashash of a dover mekabel tumah, then all the water that went through it went past, touched the dover mekabel tumah, and it wouldn't been able to go to the mikveh without these plugs. Otherwise, it would have flown to the other hamshach. Went to one mikveh. It's not an issue. Today we have an issue. It's going to different places.
So we have 3 different plugs, or it's like one plug, and then we put plugs.
You put plugs on the sides. If you have one plug leading from the oitzer, then you have 3 plugs on the sides, one leading to each bite.
Could you just make 3 different plugs?
Hamshachas?
No, 3 different plugs in the oitzer. Instead of having one plug, you could have 3 plugs.
You could, but every extra hole that you have means you have another place for a leak to happen. So regardless, even if you have 3 different ones, how are you going to control? You're still going to have to plug it back when you have the right amount of water.
Before the rain comes, and then
Yeah, we'll do what before the rain comes? You have enough water in the oitzer to fill up 6 mikvahs. You're going to have at some point to block one hole and open another hole. It means your hands are going to be using something which is a suffix of a keli. According to the Rambam, this piece of wood is a keli. And according to the Rosh, when you have the water passing on something which is mekabel tumah, it's paisel the water. You have amshachas. Now you had rainwater and you passed it through something which is mekabel tumah. So you have a problem. So today we have more of an issue with these things. So today, if you use wood, a piece of wood, which was not specifically made for the mikveh, or you use a piece of rubber, which was not specifically made with that intention, so it could be a problem of davar mekabel tumah. So you have to make sure that if you end up having to use plugs, if you have oitzer in the mikveh, and using plugs, it has to be done according to what seems today, where we know what the Rebbe Rashab holds, it will be much better with rubber, because rubber is never mekabel tumah. Wood is only mekabel tumah sometimes. Rubber, according to the Rebbe Rashab, is only mekabel tumah if it has a clay kibble, if it has a place to hold. And according to the Rebbe, only if it's something that you stand on. But if you make something from rubber completely for the purpose of the mikveh, it's the best you can use. You have 3 different plugs, and each one goes to the right place. A pile, there's different shittas in the Lubavitcher Rabbanim. Some Lubavitcher Rabbanim will say, well, the Rebbe Rashab wanted wood, so we'll use wood and we'll make it dedicated to only wood. The Rabbi Fegelstock is machmir, only wood, never has any plastic on any path going towards the mikveh.
No rubber?
No rubber, no plastic. Uses wood. So I use wood. I sometimes use rubber and sometimes use wood, depending on who builds the mikveh. Both of them, it's according to understanding the Rebbe Rashab, it's better to use rubber.
I really don't understand. What's the issue when it comes 3 hamshachas?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because you have 3 hamshachas, 2 of them are closed. So if the plug is something which is mekabel tumah, splits into 3, yeah.
No.
So now you have to plug the other 2 so the water doesn't come out of them. So automatically all the water that's going through is going, the only way it reaches the mikveh is because it's touching those 2 plugs on the side.
Does that change the pipes?
Huh?
Does that change the pipes? Like those can be plastic rubber?
If the pipes could be plastic, yes. A lot of people, I say gutters, we use plastic better than anything else, obviously.
You say it's in California, that'd be better than use it.
The question is, what else do you have an alternative? Metal's for sure a problem. Wood could also be a problem. Cement, the Rebbe Rashab used cement, so that's if you could get you're going to see tomorrow in the mikveh has supposed to have, I don't know, I hope it does, it's supposed to have clay pipes for that reason. Clay pipes. So now, practically speaking, when you have a plug made from wood rots. Now, the Rebbe Rashab, when he made the plugs in the mikveh, it was a wooden plug and a piece of wood. If you have a plug sitting on the Eitzer, it's going to rot because on one side is moisture, on the other side, based on the change of temperature, it could rot. The wood could rot, could expand. You won't be able to pull it out. It could shrivel on the other side where it's dry, and it's a problem. Now, you could treat the wood. Cork is made for a keli. Using a piece of cork, what are corks made for? Specifically to close kelim. Every piece of cork you're going to buy, whatever size it is, unless you have a company which produces cork specifically for you, the cork is made specifically for a keli. It's made to close a bottle of wine. It's made to close a container of cookies, whatever it is. You have different kinds of corks that you have today. They're specifically made for a keli.
What does it mean if they made it specifically for you, then it's fine? You're also just using it for a keli.
No, you're not. You're using it to plug a hole in the wall. It's not a keli. There's no keli.
What about,
It's much,
stone cork?
It's like this. So the problem with a stone cork is that a stone doesn't seal. Good. So you're going to see tomorrow, the Rabbi Fegelstock, this is mikveh tomorrow, is Rabbi Fegelstock, he makes a piece of stone, and he makes it a perfect circle in the stone. And then he gets a wood, I think a certain kind of wood that doesn't rot, doesn't expand, doesn't shrink. And that wood sits in there, it doesn't rot, and it's exactly the size of the hole. Because if you do it in concrete is never smooth like you want it to come out, so there'll always be leaks out of it. And you can't put a shmata around the cork to make it tight, because then the shmata is a keli. So all the water is a shovim. Not shovim, whatever, it's a problem.
You could make this smooth stone with glass.
Glass is a tamei midrabanan.
So cheres you can make.
Cheres is particular cheres not a problem. So you have,
I don't know if it's a question, but if I have 47 the third doctrine,
yeah,
then I have a leak from the Eitzer,
yeah.
and you have on Shuchat, what do I care that there's a leak over there?
You don't care if there's a leak. You just care because your mikveh is going to overflow. And then when somebody's going to table is schila.
No, but you have 47 the actual.
What does it make a difference? You still have a problem with schila and you still have a problem of all your floors being flooded. Your floor is flooded. You don't want to have floods in the mikveh. Destroy your whole mikveh. So you have, what I'm saying is now, the Rebbe Rashab, so he had this cork made, this plug made out of wood. But it would be better, saying is today, certain Rabbanim will say it's much better to use rubber, because rubber, the Rebbe Rashab says, not mekabel tu'am b'chlal. And cork, and wood, could be mekabel tu'am sometimes. Some Rabbanim will say that Rebbe Rashab said to use wood and not to left rubber hanging, so don't touch anything that has to do with rubber. So what's the solution? If you have taka, you're using wood or using rubber, and you have an Eitzer, and now you're holding up the water with that cork. You want to be able to close the cork. So there is a Geduli Tahara. The Geduli Tahara says that above the line of 40 sa'ah, you could use something which is mekabel tumah to close the hole. So today, you might see in certain mikvahs, when they make an Eitzer, that they out of the Eitzer to feed above the line of 40, it's a big Eitzer. On the bottom, it has enough water to hold 40 sa'ah according to the small shear. You don't have to hold the massive shear like in a mikvah. It's a small shear, whatever it is, less than 100 gallons. And then on top of that, you have the hole. So now, when you plug it, it's not a problem, because according to Gedultan, it's not a problem.
Why don't you just put it in the top and flip it?
What do you mean? Flip what?
Make a hole in the top of it and then,
The Eitzer is staying in place. I can't make an Eitzer that's movable. It's a Keli.
no, you make it,
There's no way to turn it over. It's a Keli.
concrete.
It's a concrete box.
So the never gets empty, like.
The Eitzer never gets empty. There's always,
If you're limited in rainwater, then you're making a whole other.
So if you're limited in the rainwater, usually you don't make an Eitzer. Or you make an Eitzer, and then you hope that it's going to rain enough. But usually in places where they're limited in rainwater, they feed the mikveh first, and then they worry about the Eitzer afterwards. First, they make sure the mikveh is filled up. Then afterwards, you can build the Eitzer to get extra water.
Why shouldn't you be much to make a bigger share?
What?
To make the whole top.
Because the only chumrah that we have is when we're going toiveling. For everything else, we follow the halach. For all the other shiurim, we follow Reb Chaim Noah's shir, and that's the shir lahalach. Same way when we follow the shir of Shleisha Lugin, or Machmer, ends up being a much smaller shir, and we don't say, oh, we take the Rebbe Rashab's shir of Mek Shamim, of Mem Sa'ah, and then you divide it, because each Sa'ah is 24 Lugin, and you split that into it, it's going to end up being like 2 bottles of water. We don't do that. We go, and the same thing is when it comes to shiurim of Shefres HaNoid, the whole Shefres HaNoid for Chibur between mikvahs. We also follow this, the shir of Chaim Noah. We don't say we have to go much bigger shir. It's better to have it. But if you have, you're not going to pass a mikvah if it doesn't have the bigger shir. You're not going to pass it. What I'm saying is when you have a mikvah and you have an Eitzer, for any other shir other than the shir of Mek Shamim, or if the Chaim Noah writes to follow higher shir, we follow the standard shir. This is only a chumrah to prevent the problem. And interesting that Zalman Shimon Dvorkin in his Tshuvas and Kevitz Nazash also writes this idea that if you do it above the Aboim cell line, you don't have a problem. So now you have this. Now you have this plug, and you took out the plug with your hands. Now all the water that's coming into the mikveh is coming with koyach odam. It's not naturally going there. So there's a lot of different tricks that came up how to avoid this koyach odam. Some people have a box with 2 holes, and then it falls into a box, and then you plug the box so the first water flies out. Some people have a pipe that has a bowl, like a watering bowl flies out of it, lands in the middle. That water, the first water gets drained, the next water goes over the bowl. There's different tricks how to do it. The Rebbe Rashab did not have any of these things. The Rebbe Rashab says he had a plug and he had Amshacha. He says Amshacha removes the koyach odam. However, and if you look at the Rebbe Rashab's Amshacha, it's interesting. It was much more, 2 interesting things in the Rebbe Rashab's Amshacha. First of all, it was much more than 3 tefachim long. From the Eitzer leading all the way to the mikveh was much more than 3 tefachim long. And second of all, it took a turn.
How long was it?
Was from outside all the way to inside. It was probably a good few feet. And also it took a turn. That means it didn't go, it came out of the Eitzer and took a turn. So the water coming into the mikveh is not mamash koyach odam, because the turn is going, now it's a new travel. So with that, Rebbe Rashab didn't have a problem with it. You don't have to be machmer more than the Rebbe Rashab. However, if you're in a situation where people do want to do it, so there is a relatively easy way of doing it. If you have a box right outside the Eitzer, right? So you have the plug coming out of the Eitzer, you have a box of the Eitzer water, and it has a plug, and then you have a box of concrete, and from there it falls into the pipe. It goes to a pipe on the other side of the box. So it's not falling a lot. It's going through a box, a small box. I'll explain to you what the purpose of the box is. So now you have a plug sitting in the Eitzer. So you have the entrance from the Eitzer right here, and you have a small box of concrete, and you have the other pipe on this side. It's the same height. Then you have over here, you have a plug, a rubber plug. And over here, you have the end of the box. You take a piece of wood, which is the same size as the box. And you stick it tight over there, and it's sitting, holding the plug in place. Now, what's holding the plug in place? A piece of wood. if you're going to pick up that piece of wood carefully, you're not causing the plug to come out yet. The plug is not loose yet. The plug,
Plug is
not fully loose. But if you wait a few minutes, the pressure of the water in the oitzer will send the cork flying out.
Then you will lose the plug.
You get a new plug.
No, stay in the box.
Now, first of all, the plug will land in the box. It's not going to go anywhere. It lands in the box. It's not going to go further. It will fly out and land in the box. So it will be very hard. That piece of wood. Piece of wood sitting there the whole time. When you're ready to do it, what?
Saying not always, if you have a small space.
You always have the oitzer outside.
But like, how do you, without this idea, when you plug in the plug, what stops the plug from falling out?
Usually you put silicone or something around it to hold it in place. You put it tight, you put silicone and whatever it is to hold it in place. Well, like this, you don't put any silicone. The only thing that's holding it in place is this piece of wood. When you're going to pick up that piece of wood, you didn't do anything. Your koyach didn't do anything. If you're really worried about this, if somebody's really telling you an issue about this, then you could do this trick. If you don't want to have the whole complication with having an extra box and having a hole in the middle and the water coming out and all these problems, then you could just do with that. However, like I said, the Rebbe Rashab didn't do all these contraptions. The Rebbe Rashab had a plug that took a turn and had a long amshacha. So if you have a oitzer and you don't have place to these contraptions, you don't have to do these contraptions. You're just going to make amshacha, which is going to be long and takes turns. So how do you make amshacha, which is long? You don't have that much space. So I saw a mikveh where the amshacha was made like a snake, like this, along the earth, going up and down, up and down. So that way it traveled. So you don't have that much space in width. You have 3 tvachim width, but the travel, it made amshacha going along the wall, up and down, and it was long, so it was as long as the Rebbe Rashab's. It took turns along the way, also took turns like the Rebbe Rashab, and then it solved that issue of the koyach chodem.
How do you make it like that with concrete?
Huh?
How do you make it with concrete?
You build it. When you have concrete, you can do whatever you want.
It's going up and down, you need sideways turns.
Huh?
It's going up and down, you need sideways turns as well.
It takes a turn. Every time it goes up, it turns and turns and turns and
So it didn't
turns.
have a turn going.
Huh?
That was the turn.
It starts one turn, goes up, takes another
So
turn,
that
another.
was the turn.
By the Rebbe Rashab was one turn. That was only one turn. Anyway, so that's pretty much the two things I wanted to discuss in today's share. I think we finished pretty much anything that has to do with practical that you're going to come to. The only things that we did not discuss is about filters, schilas, something which is holding up the schila. This is much further in the siman when you get to Sif Nun, and we're going to get to that topic when we get there. And also what materials have to do with that. But that's what it is. Tomorrow, as I said, tomorrow we're going to have